Yeah. So, I'm really excited that you're here, and I want to introduce my helpers to you because you're going to be able to use everyone's help at the end of what we're going to do. So, this is Avery, and this is Mrs. Fernandez Ann, and there's Claire, and Jaden, and Holly. And Claire made you guys the special journals that you're gonna, that's what we're gonna, making history. So you guys get to decide what you put in here, but it's, and writing stuff down is how we know what's happened in the past. Why would that be beneficial? Why would that be helpful? Will?
Because you can remember what you've done.
Yes, to refer back to, yeah. Uses a guide. What, were you thinking the same thing, Daniel? Yeah. So history, we learned, 50 years ago, who would have thought when this Presby was built back in 1903, who would have thought that in 50 years a man would be walking on the moon? And that's what we're celebrating now. Daniel, but have you thought of that? Well, it's kind of amazing. So history is good to know so that it can guide your future. So there's different things that you want to write down and that you can write down in a journal. Some people write down the weather, and some people write down, what are some of the other things?
What they did that day, who they saw.
Important things. So I have a sample right here of the journal, and see it has the same stitching that Claire used. And look at how beautiful that penmanship is. The man that wrote this. So he wrote about this man back in 1876, wrote what I thought was kind of interesting. He wrote Monday the 13th. Mr. Leap up here today. So they had a visitor. He brought a butcher to look at the fat cow. I chopped some wood and made a small gate for the chicken house. The weather was pleasant. So he wrote down the weather, he wrote down the date, and then he wrote down what he did and an important thing that happened that day. So it can be as simple as that. And he did that day after day, and you just can kind of follow. But he was, and there's really kind of interesting information in here. And then again, later he wrote, he was making grapes and vines, and he said, hoeing vines today, pleasant, cool, and foggy. So then next year he could look back and compare maybe if the weather to what was going on and what they were doing. That would be one thing that you would like about history. This is another sample of a little girl that was your guys' age. She's 8 years old, and this was her first trip from the Dalles. How many of you been to the Dalles? So everybody's been to the Dalles. Do you know that big hill that's between the Dalles and us? She had to go over that with horse and wagon, and she's your age. And back in 1868, her grandfather decided that this was the place to come because there was lots of big grass, bunch of grass, and this was a good place. And she said that so the steep hills we nearly all walked. And we had to follow the trail the Indians had to use many years ago. So that was something too. They knew that from the writing down that this was the Eel Trail, that's what they called it, E-E-L, Eel Trail. They could use that to get to the other side of the hill. So history. And we had to rest many times because of the fat horses. And the little girl was in charge of taking a rock and putting it below the wheel when the horse had to rest because the hill was so steep. And so she had to have a big enough rock so that the wheel wouldn't go over it. Because what would happen if the wheel went over it and the horses were so tuckered?
Then the wheel would
No, Columbia.
Oh, I thought it was Clickatack too.
Did ya? Well, they,
So they were on the other
Like
side?
huh?
So they were not on the other side?
They were on the Dalles side, and then there's Dallesport, and they used to call that Rockland back then. And then they went up over the hill to come to Centerville. Yes. So that's a journal. She journaled that and said, and she's, so they started at 10 a.m. So it's after that now. So this morning when you guys got here, that was 10 a.m. And by reading her journal, they got to the top at 11 p.m. It took them all that time to make it. They could just go a little ways and then they'd have to place the rock. But can you think about being 8 years old and having that responsibility of having to carry a big enough rock to stop the wagon?
But you have to carry it?
Well, yeah, when
What
they,
about putting it in the wagon?
then you'd, do you think that would make it be harder for the horses?
Yeah.
But maybe they did. I don't know. That's not something that is wrote down, so we don't know. But if had it been, then we would know. So that's the benefit of history, is that you know what's happened in the past.
Can I move seats?
Yes.
Seats
So that's another thing. The other sample that we have is like this map. So this tells all kinds of stuff. And this is, the map that we have here is from the Missouri to the road from the Missouri to the Oregon Trail. And so it's, and it says like, this is the most trying section for the travelers of the whole route. Water, so you have to have water every day, though good and plenty, is difficult to reach, as the river is hemmed in by high and vertical rocks, and many of the by-streams are without water in the dry season. So that's kind of like coming up the Clickatack grade, I'm thinking. That they were going, so you boys that were thinking Clickatack, yeah? They had to go by land like that. Grass is only to be found at the marked camping places, and barely sufficient to keep strong animals from starvation. Game there is none. The road is very rough and volcanic rocks, detrimental to the wagons and carts. Sagebrush consisted only the fuel. So they didn't have fuel like gasoline and diesel. So what fuel are you thinking they're talking about?
Horses.
They use horses for
Water.
travel, but what would be the fuel? The water would be fuel for the humans and the animals. But what do you think, Jasper?
Grass. Grass would be the fuel for the horses that would pull the wagon.
Okay, so but what fuel do you think that there says? The sagebrush consists of the only fuel. They're lucky that by all these hardships, the traveler is not harassed by the Indians, who were peaceful and harmless. So the fuel is to make the fire. That's what they needed the fuel for. So it would be things that burned, is what they were saying.
Wood, dead grass,
To cook.
and dead stuff, like dead plants.
Yeah, So sagebrush was available. West of the fishing falls, salmon fresh and dried can be obtained from the Indians. So they talked about what they ate. So that can be something that you can put in the journal, your food, how you got around. You know, they didn't have bridges and stuff. They had to use ferries, or they had to find where they could cross. But we don't have to worry about that today.
Or they could
Still, that
swim.
information, what?
They could swim.
Yeah, that information is good to
It
know.
would be hard.
We
Yes.
still use ferries though.
Yes, we do, yeah, so it was a proven good thing, huh? Yeah.
But how would the ferry start since they didn't have any fuel? Like,
They had to find fuel, huh? And so they would bring the trees from the Simcoe Mountains.
so they would
to-
put coal to start the fire to start the boat. But how would they find coal? They just burn
Wood.
wood
So,
that's burnt, smash it up, and then put it in there.
so the other, another way to that history gets passed is by storytelling. So I'm going to tell you guys a little story about me when I was your age. Had I written it down, we would know the facts. But because I can't tell you if I was 6, 7, or 8, but I was about your age. Maybe, yeah, I couldn't have been over 8. And what would happen in the summertime is my grandmother would take us up into the mountains, and her sister. So these 2 little old ladies would take us 3 grandkids, and we would get to go stay in the mountains for like a week at a time, sometimes 2 weeks at a time. There was no electricity, there was just beds, chairs, tables, just the bare necessities to get around. To live in. We had a roof, and I remember that the windows would open, and they could swing open, and I'm thinking, at nighttime when the trees are like this, and you're up there, and all this wildlife is all around you, and the window opens, and sometimes you wanted the window open because it would be really hot, and you could get a cross breeze. And so I would hold my grandma's hand because I was kind of scared at nighttime. But it was just so much fun, and we were never bored. We would think that we were the 3 musketeers, and we would take sticks and we would sword the
Trees?
Grass, chop the grass down with our swords, and we were just handies. But it was just a stick, all play. And we made little forts with it, and we played in the forts and stuff. One day, we decided without asking, because we weren't supposed to really do this, that we were going to go fishing. And we had been, so we went and picked our twigs. Well, when we were there, the cousin that's just a little bit older than I, we thought we seen something black out in the woods, but we didn't really know what it was. And so we said to each other, well, we're not going to say anything because we don't know what it is, and no one's going to believe us. So we didn't say anything. The next day we had gotten our sticks, and we put the fishing line, and we put the safety pin for the hook, because basically we were kind of playing, and that we were going to go fishing. And we took off for our walk, and we're walking along. Well, they were bigger than me, and they were boys, and they were talking about, well, what would happen if you seen a bear? What should you do? So the oldest cousin always liked to tell the littler cousins what to do. And he said, you need to pick a tree that is big enough that the bear can't just push it over, because then it would push the tree over. You don't run, because bears are faster than you are. You pick a tree and you climb it, but you don't want to pick too big of a tree that the bear can follow you. So it has to be a little enough tree that the bear can't follow you.
Medium size.
Yep, and it has to be big enough that they can't push it over. And so we're kind of looking around and watching looking at the trees, and I'm behind them, and I could hear this wrestling. And I said, did you guys hear that? Well, I was just the little girl cousin, and so they're like not paying attention to me because they're talking about bigger, better things. And we're hike up to the top of the hill, and the cousin yells, deer, no, bear! And I dropped my fishing pole, and I turned around, and I had long hair, and they said it stood out. I was running so fast, I didn't look for no tree to climb, but I was getting out of there, because what happens if you're, who would the bear eat?
Them. You.
The slowest person.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to be the slowest person.
You didn't want to be lunch.
No, I didn't want to be lunch. So I ran and ran and ran, and I didn't stop till we got clear back to the cabin. But had I wrote that down, do you think all of the cousin stories would be the same?
No.
Yeah, but if I had wrote it down, I could tell you exactly. Yes, I was this years old, and yes, it was on this day, and yes, but now it's just a story, because I didn't journal it. So that's what you guys can do, is we're going to have you learn how to journal today. Yes, Daniel?
Did you see the bear have babies or not?
No, I think that it was a bear that maybe just had gotten away from its mama, and so it was
usually
eating.
they have, because usually if you see bear with its kids, you should walk away slowly.
Yes.
Because if which kids, it would think you're a predator.
So guess what? Guess how long it took me to go back and get my
2
fishing
minutes.
pole that I dropped because we weren't supposed to be doing that, so we couldn't tell. So guess how many days it took me? It took me 2 days to get enough courage built up to go back and get the fishing pole out of the middle of the road. We didn't want to get in trouble.
2 days.
2 days.
To just grab it or to wait.
To just go on that trail again.
It would just to go on that trail.
Just
I'd be fearless.
You would?
Yeah, because bears don't come near trails. They stay way farther away than.
But sometimes they go near trails.
That's very rare. Well, not
Did you
that
see
rare.
what kind of bear it
What do you
was?
think makes the trails?
Bears!
Yes!
Animals! Deer!
Yes!
Trails.
Yes, the bears are on trails.
They make the
Daniel.
So no,
Did you see what kind of bear it was? Do you know what color it was?
No, he was as scared as I was, and that's what really kind of helped us get our courage to go back and get the fishing pole, is that when we talked about it, it's like, well, the bear ran too. He didn't look for no tree to climb or anything to protect him from us. He was as scared as we were, and so that's what we decided that.
Because if it was
The bear was
like a brown bear that go up the tree. A brown?
No, and here they were all talking about that.
Because if
No.
did they go up a tree when the bear came?
No, they ran, but they weren't as fast as I was. But if they were telling their story, do you think that they would say that I was faster than them?
No.
But if I wrote it down. But that's one of the memories, so that's something I would journal. So you guys have these samples that are around the room and see the importance of it, and we want to help you write down, start your own journal.
And the last time, we actually ran out of time to write down anything because we were so interested in talking. And I love the way we interacted too, it was great. So my suggestion is that maybe we should all start with one thing, my name is, and put your name. So open your book and put my name is, and then write your name. Then if you lose it, you'll be able to get it back too. So my name is in your name.
We got 8 minutes.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna have to really hurry.
What day is it?
You know it's
24th.
and it's actually written on the cover.
No, it's just the date.
April 21st?
It's the day.
Is it April 21st?
It's July, honey. But it says,
24th.
oh, July 24th, my name is Jasper. J.
My
okay.
mind's just going crazy right now. I
That's
think
fine.
everything's small right now.
July 24th.
Okay,
Can we
July.
start another sentence? Or
Yeah, another sentence.
Everything right now is really small. My mind's just.
Perfect.
How do you spell Presby?
It's on the front of your book.
P-R-E, it's right up there.
Yes, and so where did you
It looks
just
like
come
somebody's
from?
coming.
Where did you just come from? Was it the clock things?
Upstairs.
Okay, you could say today at the Presby.
24.
You could just copy this. Today at the Presby, I learned about clocks.
In here, there's extra.
Right here. So what did you learn about clocks today? What did you learn about clocks today? Anything? Was it interesting?
Yeah.
Were the clocks different than we have today?
No.
They weren't?
No.
Yeah, the only clock I use now is my phone. That's very different.
Did he talk about how you could use the sun to tell time?
Yeah.
Jasper.
Yeah, I did. I just don't know how to read it.
But
But
you know
you
you might
practice.
learn to do
You
that.
my husband was so good at it, he could get it like down to 15 minutes.
And a lot of people use their shadow to tell them what time it is. they'll go out and stand in front of the sun and see where their shadow goes, and then they'll know just about what time it is, just by their shadow.
And you can, like, if it's just up in the air, the
You'd
sun
say about
is
noon, right? About time for lunch.
I could probably
Your
tell
tummy
you.
would be growling and telling you that too.
But anyway, my tummy would already, I'm always hungry.
Are ya?
What else did you